Hello, I'm Ben. Welcome to the channel. So as you see from the title, today's subject is going to be a little different from what we do normally, but divorce is a major subject that people unfortunately have to deal with from time to time. I myself am divorced, and when I was a young man, I actually did not get married young. I waited until I was closer to 30 before I considered marriage because my expectation was I didn't want to get divorced. And what I thought at the time is if you got married too young, that you would more likely end up being divorced, because the most common thing you hear people say is, well, I had kids too young, so never got to live, and so they ruined their marriage because of that. Or I got married too young and never got to date and sow my oats, basically. So they get a divorce for that. And so from my reading and studying at the time, I thought being a little older before making that step would prevent it. But at the end of the day, it's very simple. If you watch the channel often, you know I say things in a very simple way. Marriage is very easy. Two people just have to decide once they get into a marriage that they want to stay in the marriage, and they have to make that decision daily. If one doesn't, it doesn't matter how hard the other one works, it will not work. And so from my experience, and I'll tell you a few stories, little anecdotes through this, and I'll talk a little bit about just, what entering the dating world looks like too. So to give you some personal information, I was married for just under 10 years and was in a relationship with that person for 3 years prior to that too. So the total time was nearly 14 years. And, I was a serial monogamist in life. Basically, I had one girlfriend and I stayed with them for a very long time. And then even after divorce, I've still played that role to an extent. But the point that I want to make here today is when divorce is right and when it's not. And because there's a lot of people going online to find out information, and we'll start from the biblical perspective. What does the Bible say? And so I have the Strong's Concordance here, and that's where we look up the word divorce. So the word divorce is in the Bible in one verse. That's Jeremiah 3 verse 8. And then divorced is in Leviticus, Numbers, and Matthew. And divorcement is in Deuteronomy, Isaiah, Matthew, and Mark. So some of these considerations of divorce, it's not talking necessarily about a man and woman marriage. It's talking more specifically about God and the church, or God and the nation of Israel. So when you look up that, you kind of have to read the verses to understand which ones are talking about what you're talking about. So Jeremiah 3 verse 8 is about Israel and Judah's unfaithfulness. And basically it was God saying that those countries, in the Bible the suggestion is if God is the husband and the nations are the wife, so those countries weren't living in agreement with the relationship. They were adulterous, and so God had to put them away, is what that's saying. So that divorce is not talking about specifically a man and a woman. And then in Timothy, the verses that are there are actually Leviticus 21 verse 14. It's talking more about people and what people are offering and being profane within how they're displaying themselves. And it's pretty dead on to what it would be in a human relationship, but it's not specifically about marriage and marriage law. So what we'll do is we'll go to Matthew 5 verse 32, and then Jesus actually taught about divorce in Matthew 19 verse 7. So we'll go into that, and Matthew 5 verse 32 says, "It has been said, whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. But I say unto you that whosoever put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication." So basically, if you put away your wife and it's not because someone cheated or she cheated, you're causing her to commit adultery from that point on, and whosoever shall marry her shall also commit adultery. So you don't want to divorce somebody that is a good person for that reason, because then you're put in a position where every act that they do, which may be love in their mindset after that fact for the rest of their life, that's adultery. So you want to make sure, and in divorce, there's not a bunch of reasons for divorce. So now in the modern world, we come up with all these different reasons for divorce, and we'll have some stories about that too. But the fornication piece is the piece that breaks the bond or the vow of God. So when you take those vows, I'll read what they say. But I've talked about some stories around that before. the vows are very specific because you're doing that in front of God, right? Some people view it as just a contract with the government. That's not the case. When you're telling somebody you're going to marry them, it means a bit more than that. So in Jesus' teaching about divorce, this is in Matthew 19, verse 7. It says, "And it came to pass that when Jesus finished these sayings, he departed from Galilee and came into the coasts of Judea beyond Jordan. And great multitudes followed him, and he healed them there. And so while he was there doing this in front of these people, the Pharisees also came upon him, or came to him." The Pharisees are the religious sect, or the pastors of the Jewish church. They're the ones that ultimately decided to hang Christ on the cross and got in front of the Romans to try to force that hand. And those are the people that basically are making their living off of being church people. Okay, we talked about the Catholic Church some. It's about the same feel, the same context. So the Pharisees also came upon him, tempting him, and saying unto him, "Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause?" And this is what Jesus answered. He answered them and said unto them, "Have ye not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female?" So there's your answer to the gender question, right? "And said, For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they..." Let me make sure I'm going to the right spot. "And they twain," that's verse 5. Yeah, this is verse 6. "Shall be one flesh," meaning they consummated the marriage and became one. "Whereforever they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let no man put asunder." So that's actually in the marriage vows when you do the vows out of the Bible. I've shared a story before where some elders in the church that were female were suggesting that a woman leave her husband because she had concerns about him having an interest in porn. He wasn't a bad guy. He didn't cheat, etc., but apparently he looked at porn at some point. I told them vehemently, you don't put asunder a marriage that was vows made to God. I kind of chastised them both on this and then handed it off to the young lady's father for him to carry it from there, because that is bad advice, okay? It's not biblical. You have to go by what the Bible says, and here it says, "Wherefore, what God hath joined, let not man put asunder." So then the Pharisees, this is still the conversation between these Jewish priests and Jesus. "And they say unto him, Why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement and put her away? He saith unto them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, hath suffered you to put away your wives. But from the beginning it was not so, saying from the beginning marriage was supposed to be a beautiful thing that was pure. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, so unless she slept around and cheated, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery." So basically saying, if she didn't cheat and you're messing with someone else, you get married again, you're committing adultery. "And whosoever marrieth her which is put away doth commit adultery." So that's Jesus saying that, right? So divorce should be only if someone cheats. That's it. "His disciples say unto him, If the case of all men be so with his wife, is it not good to marry? Should men not marry? But he said to them, All men cannot receive this saying, saying they to whom it is given. For there are some eunuchs, which were so born from their mother's womb, and there are some eunuchs, which were made eunuchs of men, and there are some eunuchs, which have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of God for heaven's sake. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it," talking about marriage. So there's the answer. There's that's the only times divorce is mentioned in the Bible. It goes into the laws in the Old Testament about Jewish law around marriage and what that should be. And I read this because the conversation we're about to have, this is useful in that context, because you want to know before you get into the conversations of modern day knowledge where you start. I start at the Bible because that's my guidance, right? That's what I think the operations manual for this life, I think, is the Holy Bible. I'm a Christian. That's what I believe. I'm a biblical Christian, so that's top of mind for me. So when I'm going into conversations such as these, I want to start there before I get into anything else. And as we're talking here, I'm going to look up Mark as well, because it did have in that Matthew verse that I read, it had some suggestions in Mark right below that, where it said there may be some additions. So let's look at that real quick. And it says Mark 10, verse 1 through 12. So I'll take a quick look at that. Mark 10, verse 1 through 12. And when I'm looking at this, it may be talking about, this is when the temptation of Christ was happening too. So let's see, Jesus teaching about divorce. It talked about that. We talked about that already. Mark 10, verses 1 through 12, it says, And he arose from thence and came unto the coast of Judea, the farther side of Jordan, and the people resorted unto him again, and he taught them again. And it's basically it's telling the same story. The Pharisees came to him and asked, Is it lawful for a man to put aside his wife? And he answered them, saying, What did Moses command you? And they go through it all. And it says, the disciples asked Jesus that again, later, about divorce. And he saith unto them, Whosoever shall put away his wife and marry another committeth adultery against her. And if a woman shall put away her husband and be married to another, she also committeth adultery. So when he was teaching that, the idea specifically was around infidelity. So moving on into the subject matter, though, divorce is a common thing, but it's not as common as you think. So everyone says that 55% of marriages end in divorce. That's incorrect. You have people that get married many, many times, and those people get divorced quite a bit. I myself, in this life, have met a person that was married 9 times and divorced 9 times. I know 4 or 5 people that have been married 5 times and divorced all of those times, right? So those numbers are not correct. They're skewed dramatically in a false direction, saying marriage is worse than what it is. I would say that if you were looking at the actual numbers on how many, I would say that probably 70% of marriages are solid marriages and they stay that way their entire lifetime. You know, I look at my older brother, he and his wife were both, married young. They met in college and were both pure people, and they got married and have stayed married their entire lifetime and have raised 4 beautiful young men and are still together today. So it comes down to, it doesn't matter what age you are when you get married. What matters is the maturity and the commitment level to the actual marriage itself. So unfortunately, if you do go through a marriage and it gets to the point where you're getting divorced because someone has been unfaithful, you now have that choice to make, and it's fine with the Bible. If fornication, if infidelity was part of it, that's fine in God's eyes. So back in the day, when I was growing up, if people were divorced, the church had an attitude about it. They had a certain a viewpoint about it. And that confusion actually came from one of the verses that will come up when you look into divorce. But specifically, it's talking about when a pastor, when a male leader wants to take a role in a church, that he should not be married to someone that was previously divorced, and he should not be divorced unless it was for that one reason of fornication. So it's pretty clear. It's just you have to take the time to read the verses around the one specific verse, okay? So, here, and I'll tell you, Israel's and Judah's unfaithfulness, that was Jeremiah 3, verse 8, and it talks about divorce there, but it's talking about between the community or the nation of Israel and God. Then holiness required of priests, that's Leviticus 21, verses 14, and it talks about divorce there, and it says specifically that pastors should not be with a woman that is profane, or is playing the whore, or she profaneth her father, or she be, or she has other issues. And if she does these things, it actually says she should be burnt with fire. So if you want to see that, that's Leviticus 21, verse 14. So it's sometimes misused and misquoted. So there's instructions for cleansing in Leviticus 22, verse 13, which also mentions divorce. So you have to kind of read those to get the subject matter. But enough on that point. The point that I want to make is this. I started today with a gentleman calling me early in the morning. I hadn't talked to him in quite some time. But he's going through a divorce right now, and the reasons are the same as mine. And this is personal, but I'll put it out there just because I'm doing the video on it, so why not? I am divorced. I filed for divorce myself personally. It's because my ex was unfaithful. And in that, there's always excuses and reasons and everything else. But here's the point. In any relationship, this is earth. Both people will have the opportunity to be unfaithful. In my family, there's a person who's been in a relationship because they idolized the relationship that their parents had, and that person's primary goal was to have that same type of marriage. And the parents were incredible and loved each other to pieces until the day they died. And it was a great example of how it should be. But this person didn't have the same. And so this person's spouse was running around on them for 30 plus years, and everyone in their family was aware, and they were aware that everyone was aware, and it destroyed the family setting. It destroyed the home that should have been there. And when that happens, the inappropriate nonsense that comes from that person who's cheating and lying, it is ridiculous. The level of stupidity that they put out there and expect other people to accept, it's nonsensical on a cartoonish type level. Okay? And I say that to say, I hope this doesn't ever happen in your family, but when that happens, it drives wedges between people, and rightly so, because it's dishonesty and it's filth. So when you see dishonesty and filth, you should separate yourself from that. And that would be my best suggestion based on my lifetime and my opinion and what I read in the Bible. So let's get to the next point. And guys, remember that this is my opinion, okay? This is my opinion, but it's based on the wisdom that I've got from the Bible and the wisdom that I've got from my life. So when I filed for divorce, I'll give some details. My ex was with another person and had been for quite some time. And I was traveling the country building plants and doing things like that while paying for her to go to school and paying for medication for her mother and all these other things. And the reason that she and I were apart as much as we were at the time is because I was building plants and going to places to do that. And then she was still in school, and I was paying for that too. So the reasoning was that her mother was sick, and she had to support the mother. Long story short, it came to light that that wasn't the case, because you can tell. There's conversations, there's words that are used, there's things that hint. So basically, I confronted the situation. It was proven to be the case, and in that case, I would hope for you that you do what I did. I cut it right there, because it no longer was the same. And let me explain that very quickly. And I'm not trying to beat up on anybody, but this was the truth for me. I'd found out all these things, and I'd done what I needed to do that day, and closed the bank accounts, did that kind of stuff. And I was at the store with my brother that evening. And I was lucky to have him in my life at the time, because he also was in school. But I was able to bounce things off of him and just vent. And he would listen. And, I just remember being at the store, and I remember thinking in my head, just couldn't shake the idea that the whole world was on fire because this relationship was ending. And it was ending because, and the feelings, let me be clear about that. The feelings had nothing to do with the marriage or the ex. The feelings had to do with my expectation of marriage and my viewpoint of marriage. I was devastated and disappointed because of my view of marriage. It was supposed to be pure. It was supposed to be honest. There was 13 years in at this point. You have expectations where you think, am I going to have kids? Am I going to be able to do, because we hadn't, it does all these things because you've put this time in that now this chunk of your life has been ripped out, and rightly so, because you have to figure your way through it and you have to get through it. So hopefully if you made it this long into the video, now we're going to get into a little personal stuff. And this is the personal stuff that I mentioned. It took me a while to get over that. But here's the interesting thing. The guy that she was in a relationship with, she had told them that I was her ex-husband. She had told him that I was divorced. So here's the thing, being a man's man, I couldn't go break that dude's neck because he was innocent. He didn't even know. Okay? He thought she was divorced. She had told him that. And when I confronted the situation, I actually called him. I didn't call her. So I found a letter in my house where he was asking her out, which told me she wasn't wearing a ring. So she was the one in the wrong from the jump. He confirmed that. When he didn't know she was married, he thought she was divorced. He then, justified dating this divorced person. And so I couldn't be angry at anyone but her. She had made the choice. And yes, people go back and well, there was all these reasons. No, there's not. The only reasons that people cheat and people get divorced is because two people said they were going to stay in that for life and one of them decided they weren't. There's no other reasons. I mean, people talk about, well, you were treating her this way or that way. It wasn't an abusive relationship. She had everything she wanted. I supported her in every way I could, yada, 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 yada. Now, the stories that she was telling that gentleman were completely different. Okay? And so he told me some stories and I just kind of listened. And, when he was done with all this, we talked for 2 or 3 hours. And he goes, so what do you think? And I just kind of chuckled and I said, well, it's very creative. He goes, none of that's true, is it? I said, no. I said, if I was that person, how would I run multiple locations of a multi-billion-dollar corporation if I was of that character? My character would not allow me to be what that is. So in my mind, there was no choice but divorce at that point. And he was brokenhearted. I felt bad for him because he was in love. I mean, he was brokenhearted. So here I am getting divorced after being married or being with someone for 13 years, and he's known her and dated her for 13 months at this point. There was off and on a flirtation that lasted 13 months, which, of course, the ex said, no, we weren't dating that long. It was just like it matters. It was just. So not to go down that rabbit hole any further, here's the point. I had an expectation of marriage that she did not. Her grandparents cheated on each other. Her parents cheated on each other. My expectation was one of two things can happen. Either she would follow the same path and cheat on who she's with, or she could be the opposite and try to make sure she breaks that chain because she doesn't want the same situation that those people had. Well, I was wrong. The example people have is often what they live up to, and that's what happened. And so I found myself single in my 40s, as late 30s, early 40s. So returning to dating is the next piece. So once you get beyond divorce, so divorce, now what? So here's the point I'll say about this. If you've decided for some reason that you need to get divorced, and it's other than fornication, that's between you and God, the way you handle that, if that's what you must do, is you pray for forgiveness and absolution of those sins. And if it's a sin, then it's forgiven and you can move on. If it's for fornication or for infidelity, then that is within the Bible's legitimate reasons for divorce, so you're fine there. It's not a sin for you to get divorced if somebody's cheating on you. It's a legitimate reason based on the Bible verses that I just read, and you can look them up just like I did. Get you a Strong's Concordance, look up the word divorce. It'll give you the same verses I did. You seek them out and read them, and that's where you get your wisdom from. That's where the operation manual says what you're supposed to do. Okay, so that should take the stress off of you around that. The fear about financial situation, everything else, that only lasts a few weeks or a month or two. You get stuff separated out. I tried to separate stuff out quickly. I gave myself 90 days before I filed for divorce because I wanted to have the opportunity to think it through. And during that period of time, she reached out several times and was asking, that I reconsider and everything else. But here's the point. I heard a story told once about a plate. So think about this glass platter, right? The platter that your grandma put the turkey on at Thanksgiving or the ham on at Christmas that no one else was to touch, and they only used it twice a year, right? So you take that beautiful platter and you just throw it on the ground, and it breaks into 100 pieces. Now, yes, that nice, beautiful, pure platter before you dropped it was a beautiful thing and was so well thought of that people only used it twice a year, and it was a representative piece of this is quality, this is pure. Now, when you dropped it on the ground, you broke it into pieces. Can that be fixed? Absolutely. You can pick up all 100 pieces and all the shards, and you can take some good super glue or Gorilla Glue these days, and you can glue all those pieces together, and you can put that back in the shape where it looks almost exactly like it did before. And maybe it does look like it did before exactly. But here's the issue. It will never be the same plate. It's now broken. It's now cracked. It's now different. So divorce, you view it the same way. The only way I can explain that to you is that after that happened and I found out that that was the situation and that was the life that we were living, she and I could not see her in the same light. Just the day before, I thought she was one of the most beautiful creatures on the planet. But the next day, I found her repulsive. She repulsed me. And I'm not saying this to hurt her feelings because she's a very attractive person. But I don't think she watches my channel here, so I don't think it's a problem anyway. But there was a physical change in the way I saw things the next day. So if you're going through a divorce where someone ran around on you and did something, I pray that you see it the same way, because that made it very easy on me. That made it a lot easier than I thought it would be. So you get through the heartbreak. The heartbreak's not necessarily just about the person. The heartbreak's more about your vision of marriage and what you thought it was and the relationship that you thought you had, right? Because once you get out of a marriage, then people look at you differently. The married folks don't look at you the same because you weren't successful in your marriage, yada, 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 but I was successful in mine, which I always thought I didn't consider people's opinions and I didn't care. So that didn't impact me, but that does apparently impact a lot of people. So I got two stories here. One was about the gentleman that talked to me this morning. Like first thing, this is what I woke up to this morning. I was explaining to him that he'd be okay, that it's fine. Just try to separate things quickly. I separated things quickly when I filed for divorce and went in front of the attorney. I gave him the divorce decree. She had already signed her copy, and in there it said that she had everything that was hers and I'd separated everything out. We were lucky because we didn't have a house together and we didn't have children. If you have those two things, it can draw that out for years, and some women specifically draw things out like that for years just to break the person they're with and take all the money, etc. Two stories about marriage and divorce that I have. One was a friend of mine back in the 90s, and both of these stories are from the 90s because I was a young man then and I had more friends and did more things out in public. Now, as you go past that, you work a good bit, and that's about all you do. But I'll tell you about one. We'll call him Aiden. And Aiden was an over-the-road truck driver, and he also taught karate at a dojo that he owned. And he had a house that had been passed down from his grandfather to his father and then to him. And he had married a girl just a few years out of high school, and they had kids and were raising a family of 3 kids, and he was an over-road truck driver. And one day he comes home early, a day early from a load, and this was before the age of cell phones where people were tracking people 24/7. And so he pulled into his driveway and noticed there was another vehicle there. When he walked into his house, he caught his wife in the bed with another man. Now, he was a professional fighter at the time and truck driver and was not someone that you would screw with. And he could have broke that man into many, many tiny pieces, but he did not because he wanted to be sure that he got custody of the kids and everything else. He saw it for what it was. He exited the house, called the police, had the police remove the guy. When the police came, she started claiming he was doing this and that. He was outside. He hadn't done a thing. The police saw that clearly she was lying and allowed him to just leave the property and figure out what he was going to do. So I went to his dojo. We had a little apartment upstairs, and he stayed up there. Long story short about divorce and the government. He came home and found his woman running around. He was the primary income earner. They lived in a house that was his grandfather's, passed down to his father and then to him. The state gave his house to that woman. The state gave his children's custody to that woman. He had to pay her alimony and child support. And he basically had to move into this little apartment above his dojo and give his house that had been in his family to that woman. So she got his house, she got his kids, she got alimony, and she got child support. So when I talk about marriage and you think about marriage, you need to make sure you understand what it means. Okay? In the United States of America, if you get married and you don't do it right, you could give someone else everything you have. And it doesn't matter if it's historically yours for generations. It doesn't matter if it's your kids and what you've earned in the last 10 years. It doesn't matter. That woman took everything from him, and she was trash. She was trash. Ultimately, she ended up meth head. He got married again, and ultimately he was able to get his house back. The kids, unfortunately, he wasn't able to get custody back until 2 of them were beyond the age of majority. So he got the youngest kid back under his custody, but his 2 oldest kids had tons of issues because they were in the house with a crackhead growing up. And I think there's a special ring in hell for people like that break up a family and do that to people. And I am repulsed by a government that supports such nonsense just because one's a male and one's a female. Okay, so that's the first story. The next story is a young man. We'll call him Chris. When I was a young man, I owned a gym and some personal training studios, and this gentleman came in every day with his wife at the time around 8 o'clock, and they'd work out together, and then he would go to work, and then she'd go home. She was a homemaker, and he was the earner. All 3 of these stories, including mine, that's the case. The man is doing his job and pulling the weight. Modern day, though, that doesn't mean what it used to mean. And, unfortunately, the women in these stories are not loyal women. I'm not saying there's not loyal women out there. I'm just saying none of these characters were that. And so he was a computer science guy. And, I got a call from him early in the morning at my home before I actually went to the gym. And that was earlier. I was talking about 4 o'clock in the morning. He said, man, I'm losing my mind. Can I just come up there? I was like, come on, I'll be there in 30 minutes. I'll meet you at the gym in 30 minutes. He said, don't do anything stupid. You seem worked up. Just get there. So long story short, he comes to the gym and he sits in my office with me. And we talk for like 4 hours. I mean, it's like 9 o'clock by the time we're done going back and forth on this. And he tells me, that he found out his wife was cheating. There was something going on with the computer at home. So he started trying to figure out what was going on with it, was working on it, because this was the computer she used when she was at home all day, and he just wanted it to be, good for her. And as he was going through the deleted files, he found pictures that she had sent to another guy. And guys, this was back in the 90s. This was like 98, 99. And so she was pre all the dating apps. A lot of people blame a lot of stuff on the dating apps and all that these days. This was pre all that nonsense. It's just hoes are going to be hoes. It is what it is. And yes, that says in the Bible, it uses words like whores. So just understand that language is biblical. It's profaneth is what it says. It says when a woman offereth and she wears, where is that quote in these verses here? That she wears the clothes of a harlot and she profanes herself by playing the whore. Okay, this is biblical. This comes from Leviticus 21, verse 14. If you read verse 8 and 9, those words I just said are right there in the Bible. So it is what it is. And and I'm sorry for the disgusting situation here, but he even said, on her birthday, he had done this, this, and this, and had performed an act that was, below the belly button on her that day. And when he found these letters and things, he found out that she had been with another guy that day. So that was repulsive and disgusting. And I was a younger man. I was like, oof, I'd probably put her in the ground. But the long story short, it broke him. It broke his heart. So what he'd done before she even woke up, so he was doing this in the middle of the night. He got started on like 10 or 11 o'clock. He didn't mean to go through the middle of the night, but he found these things. And so once he found these things, he kept digging. And 10 o'clock became, 3 o'clock. And he had printed all this out. He made 2 copies. Back then, there was a business called Kinko's where you could go in and print stuff out and bind it. And so he went to Kinko's and he printed 2 copies and he bound them as nice books. And he put one in the mail and he brought the other one home. And so he hadn't even confronted her yet. He came to me to the gym to try to cool down and all that. And so we talked him through it. And he was a friend of mine, so we talked him through it. And once we got through it, I said, so which copy did you put in the mail and where'd it go? And he goes, I sent that to her dad. which that just killed me because this girl came from a good family. So whereas the example I had where everyone had cheated on everybody in the lineage down to where we were, this one's all of her grandparents were married still. Her parents were married still. All of her siblings were married still. And, so there was no suggestion that she should be this bad apple. But the stuff that she had written to this other guy was disgusting. And this other guy, y'all, was a piece of trash. I mean, here her husband was a successful man that loved her, cared for her, almost worshipped her, took it too far. And the guy she cheated on him with was the biggest piece of local town junkie, in and out of jail since he was 14. Just a piece of trash. And it was devastating to him. And I just remember as a young man thinking, I will never let a woman destroy me like that woman destroyed him. So when I was going through that, my response was much more tame than what it probably would have been had I not seen what he went through. So I was grateful for that education when I was younger. I hated that he had to go through it, and I hated what happened to it. But he got married again, was very happy, had kids with the next wife, and they are still very much in love and married today. So it works out. Same thing with the gentleman that I mentioned. I called him Aiden. He's also, he got married 2 years after that. And she helped him raise the 3rd kid that he had with his prior wife that he finally got custody back of. And both of them basically salvaged and had a great life after that with the right person. So that's the other piece too. So if you're going through this right now, know that there is a end to the story. Me personally, I'm not married again, but I have been dating one person for the majority of the time that I've been divorced. And I see her kid like she's my kid, and it's that kind of thing. That's the other thing I wanted to do. I want to talk about dating if you're returning to dating. So if you're newly divorced, or you're going through this, or you're thinking about getting divorced, the dating piece is a bit different now than it was pre the internet. So if you are of the age of 40 or greater, if you got out of high school before the year 2000, there's some things that you need to take into consideration, but especially if you're returning back to the dating, and I used to call it a game, but it's combat now. If you're getting back into the combat of dating these days, people don't have the morals that they used to. Women are no longer as timid as they used to be. They're no longer, when I was a kid, we used to sing that song that Sugar and Spice, girls were made of everything nice, and boys were made of frogs and dog tails, or whatever that was. That's a song from the 70s. If y'all look it up, kids used to sing that. It was a little rhyme that kids would sing. And so when I was going through the dating situation, I actually came up with some rules. It may be helpful to you. There's 29 rules here, but some of them may be a little duplicitous. But I'll say this. Just take your time, okay? When you get divorced, you want to do a couple things. You want to say, what's wrong with me, and do all that junk. I didn't do that for very long. Hopefully you won't either. I jumped into the Bible to find out what am I supposed to do, because I feel like burning the world down. And then I met the guy, and he was innocent. And when that happened, it made me put myself in check. She was the disgusting one. He was an honest guy that had been taken. And he was brokenhearted legitimately. And we talked about a year later too, and he was still, upset about the whole thing, and I told him to move on. And I did have to get a little stern, because I didn't want her to have any damage done. And so even in the divorce, I put irreconcilable differences, because there was an education that was being put forward for a specific path. And you don't want to talk about poor character if you're heading down that path, right? But the gentleman that called me this morning, they've got kids, they've got businesses together. So it's going to be a much different situation for him. And it's probably going to take years, and she's probably going to scalp him. And, when I think about these things, it really does put a pause in your mind about marriage. And I've had this conversation with the lady that I'm seeing, and it puts pause in your mind about why on earth would anybody take the risks to do that, right? Which is what the apostles asked Christ, when he was explaining divorce to them and how that worked. Said, why would anybody do that? And Jesus once again told them that's the most beautiful part of being a man, is you're supposed to take a woman and you're one together. And that was the way it was designed. Okay, so we've just gotten so far away from the design, and now it's all about the stuff and the life after, which is all temporary because it's of this world. But I'll tell you this. When you take a vow unto the Lord, so here is the laws concerning vows, and this is Numbers chapter 30, verse 9. And Moses spake to the heads of the tribes concerning the children of Israel, saying, This is the thing which the Lord hath commanded. If a man vow unto the Lord, or swear an oath to bind his soul with the bond, he shall not break his word, he shall doing according, and all that proceedeth out of his mouth. So you shouldn't take vows, period. You shouldn't take vows, period. And here's verse 3 in that Numbers 30. It says, If a woman also vow a vow unto the Lord, and bind herself by a bond, being in her father's house in her youth, and her father hear her vow, her bond wherewith she had bound her soul, and her father shall hold his peace at her. Then all of her vows shall stand, and every bond whereath she had bound her soul shall stand. But if her father disallow her in that day that he heareth, not any of her vows or her bonds wherewith she had bound her soul shall stand. And the Lord shall forgive her, because her father disallowed it. So that's why when you go into the vows of marriage, they say, who gives this woman to be with this man? And the father does, because at that point, that vow now becomes law from a soul level in God's eyes between a man and a man, being the father and the groom. And then the woman is now held to the specific importance of that vow being between the wife and the husband, which is why you don't break the marriage vows. okay? Because it is a soul-based vow claimed in front of God. So I want to put that out there too, is that's why you want to look up the word divorce, because it goes through all these things in the Bible and it'll expand your knowledge about it much more than what it would if you were just kind of guessing or looking it up in Webster's, right? Okay, so now back to the dating thing. If you're a single man that was in a divorce because of these things, and all of the stuff I'm talking about, it's based on infidelity-based divorce. Outside of that, I can see the means for any sexual wrongs. I think that's a reason to divorce somebody. Any misbehavior that's inappropriate, I think, is a reason to divorce somebody. Physical abuse, mental abuse. A lot of people are saying things are mental abuse these days just because they're tired. But actual abuse, I think, is a reason to be divorced too. That's my opinion. Biblically, it says just infidelity, but that's my opinion. So when I'm saying you're out of divorce now, you should be, in my mind, I was innocent in that situation, even though you look at yourself and say, all right, what could I have done? But at the end of the day, I kept mine in the pants. At the end of the day, I did what I was supposed to do. I went home. There were opportunities that I didn't partake in. Not because I tried to make those things happen, but just they did. The point is, it comes back down to two people that make a decision, take a vow, and stick to it. So then, in the return to dating, it was kind of it was shell shock. I mean, I hadn't been dating in, 13, 14, 15 years at that point. And so to be back in the dating world, and it's much different then. So when I started dating my ex, it was still people that you knew in your circles, who you met people, and that's how you kind of went, to everything's done online, which is ridiculous. And I'll tell you some of the risk of online. The suggestion and statistics say that you marry your mental match. So it says basically people that are highly educated or very smart marry other people that are that way because they're running the same circles and attracted to the same things. Well, dating apps changes that because you are literally going out with a complete stranger that doesn't run in the same circles with you at all. The mental capacity is not even in consideration because dating apps don't put you through a mental test, right? It's literally, is this person physically attractive enough for me to talk to? And then they say the same thing and you decide that you are, and then you go out. But men, when you enter back into the dating world at this age, most of the women have children, okay? Which is an odd situation too. Not that they have kids, but now that someone else's kids, that if you make it with this woman, ultimately you're going to be taken care of in some capacity. Then it's the appropriate relationship with the woman and the kids. How far along that you know the woman do you start to get to know the kids? Because I have a lot of friends that were very much in love with the children for how beautiful the children were, but the woman was a nightmare. And they kept the nightmare around because the kids were great, which was awful because ultimately you have no say there. So you have those things too. So some rules that I came up with about dating. That I read, I read the Love Languages book and all that nonsense too, because I was new back into the game. And I came up with some rules. The first one, and these were my rules, so they don't have to be yours, was no women with kids with multiple fathers. Because a woman that has kids with one dad, that's one thing. But when she's got 3 kids with 3 different daddies, that says something completely different about that woman. And me, I was a decent guy. I didn't sleep around with a bunch of women. I didn't do all that stuff when I was a young man. So to get to this side of life, and for it to be people who were just promiscuous or had a bunch of different kids with a bunch of different people, that's not freaking attractive to me. And so that's why I'm saying to you, give yourself time, if you're newly divorced, to get to the point where you're dating someone that matches your standards. Don't just dive right into things. And when you hear things that you don't like, stop and move on. Don't be a serial monogamist because you don't want to get into the next relationship with a person that's not going to be a match for you just because you decide to do that. Okay? And dating on this side of it, you're much older now and you earn more money. You have more options. You have a house. There's more things at risk for you now than when you were a young, dumb idiot in college or out of high school or whatever it was back then because you had nothing. Now you actually have stuff. So you could lose stuff. And if you got out of your divorce and didn't lose everything you have, well, you need to protect it that much more when you're dating. If you're not, in tune to the news, look at Tiger Woods. He dated a girl for 6 months. She tried to move into his house, and when he told her to get out and everything else, she tried to sue him for half of what he owned as if she was his wife. So I'm not saying he's a good guy. Obviously, he slept around on his wife numerous times, and she got half, which is definitely another ridiculous story. Nothing she did helped him with his golf game, yet she got half of his golf wealth, which made no sense. But he took a vow, so I guess there you go. So, all this infidelity is just bad. You shouldn't do it, period. If you're going to be in a relationship with someone, then be in that relationship. If you're not, stay the hell out of it. If you can't stay in a marriage and be dedicated to one person, don't get married in the first place, okay? But if you've gotten divorced, the next dating tip I have, 1 or 2 dates per week for the first 3 months, no more. When I first started dating again, I had this one young lady that wanted to go out just about every night. And about the 4th night, I was like, look, I don't have time for this. I said, well, maybe we can go back out this time. And basically, she was just using me for meals. And it was ridiculous. I'm not here to buy your groceries. Call your daddy. That's literally, and this is a grown woman. This is a woman that's 30 plus years old. That's how she does to feed herself. She goes on dates every night of the week, I guess. No social gatherings or parties for 6 months. This is a rule that I came up with because I went to a party and the guy was annoying and I said something and I said to annoying people and it upset the girl that I was at the party with. I never should have been at a damn party in the first place. I should have stayed my butt at home. These kids were all younger than me. She was a good bit younger than me. It didn't make any sense for me to do that, and I was annoyed for months about it. And she was a decent girl. I actually enjoyed being around her, but it was just a stupid situation that the guy, it was dumb. So no social gatherings or parties for 6 months. Give yourself time to know the person, know if you like the person, know if you don't like the person, etc. And that's a good rule, 6 months. That's a good rule before you meet their kids, too. There's no reason to meet someone's kids and feed their kids and take them out on dates and go to that additional expense until you know them and you're going to keep them around, right? So don't go with the kids. Don't go to the person's home when the kids are there. Don't do any of that for the first 6 months. So that's rule number 4. 5 is no kiss or sex on the first date. So us as adults, once you're sexually mature, sex anymore is treated a lot like a handshake, like we're bonobo monkeys. If you don't know what bonobos do, look them up. Try to refrain from that. Control yourself. The longer you control yourself around that, the more you get an opinion on the person. Here's the other thing, too. If you have sex with a person on the first date and you're not protecting yourself, STDs are everywhere. They're rampant. Okay, just because you may have been married for 2 decades where STDs weren't such a big thing, but back in our day, AIDS would kill you. So most of us took precautions. But you want to take the time to get into that because you just got out of a marriage that technically, if you're living the situation I'm thinking you didn't want to get out of in the first place, it just got sideways, and so you did. You had to make the right choice. Next thing is bring a gift on each date on date 1 through 10. I'm just saying something small. 2 things. If a woman ever suggests to me when I'm dating her that I should pay her bills or I owe her something, that's the end of that. We ain't married. I don't owe anybody anything. That's the way I see that, okay? There's a lot of confusion on dating channels about that stuff. There's no confusing. You have your bills to pay. You have your people to take care of, so do that. But bring a gift on each date. I think chocolates are great. Something cute, something sweet that says, hey, you mentioned this. I brought it. I take books sometimes because if a young lady says she likes a certain book, that would be what I'd buy. I'd buy her a book around that subject she was interested in because I read a lot of books. If someone else can read a lot of books, even if it's about different subjects I don't like, that suggests that we can spend time together just being in each other's company, reading a book that's to our liking. But I think a gift on date 1 through 10 it makes sense, like chocolate, or wine or something like that. 7. Number 7 is a clean kit. So you're working full time, you got all these things going on. You need to have a kit in your car to clean up if you're going to go on dates, and you're not going to have time to make it back home before you go on a date. So a clean kit makes a lot of sense. Toothbrush, mouthwash, things like that, Q-tip, whatever. Women, I'm sure it's makeup and a different kind of kit. But for guys, you need a little something, okay? And in that should be everything that you would need to be prepared for a date. I'll leave that there. All right, the next one, no cell phones on the date. Probably the 3rd date I went on after being single, got up and walked out because I'm sitting at the table with this broad, and granted, I've already worked 14 hours that day, and now I'm out on a date with this broad, and I'm trying to talk to her and everything, but every few seconds she's looking at her phone. About the third time she did it, I stood up, threw a $10 bill on the table for the coffee that I ordered, and I walked out. And so, and also meet at the restaurant for your first 2 or 3 months. Maybe not 3 or 4, but first 2 or 3 months. Because if you're meeting at the restaurant, you can do exactly what I just did, and she's got to ride home. Okay? When you're going and you're picking up the person from their house and everything else, that was cool back when you were in high school and college, but not in the adult world. In the adult world, let her meet you somewhere. What if she makes claims that you did this or did that? If you're in public, she can't make these claims. You go in, you get a table, she walks in, she sits at the table. When you leave, you can let her leave first if you think she's jiggy, or you can walk her out to the car where you're standing in open lit areas so people can see you in the camera. That way, because this is a stranger, guys. The way dating works these days, this is a stranger. Obviously, if it's not a stranger, then do what you think is right. But I would say don't pick her up, meet at the place, and no cell phones on the date. Number 9 is wine on a first date. Helps people relax. It may help her relax. It may help you get to know her a little better. Not drunk, just to sip a little wine to relax some so the nerves don't ruin the date. Sometimes dates go bad because people are just extremely nervous. I had a girl accidentally spit some food on my arm one time, and I could not look away. I was like, ugh. And it just sat there. I couldn't think about anything else at that point. It's like, I don't know you and you just spit on me. So just think about those things to break some of the nerves. Rule 10 is don't over communicate. There's too much instant gratification these days. I'm an old man. When I was a young guy, she had a phone at her house. I had a phone at my house. Everyone in the house used those phones. So you would call, you'd talk to her for a few minutes, somebody get off the phone, and you're like, all right, well, look, I got to go. And so I'll see you at school, or I'll see you at work, or whatever. And you get off the phone. Now, they want to know something, they text you. Or it's Facebook, or it's something else. It's endless. For the first 2 months, you need to limit the communication, because you want to give yourself time to figure out if you like the person, or is the person just keeping you in the conversation so busy that you can't figure out what you got going on. Also, though, if this person's blowing you up and won't let you do what you need to do during the day, that's something to consider as well. But don't over communicate. You don't know this person yet. They're a stranger. You just started dating. You're a stranger. I don't suggest dating multiple people at a time. I suggest paying attention to what you have, but do not get in a relationship with every person you date. You need to take some time, because if you just got divorced, you just got out of a marriage, you need to take some time to figure out what you like. It may have changed since you were young, or it may have changed you since the divorce. Since the divorce, you may have higher standards that you need to maintain, or you need to go after, that you need to look for. Because the divorce may have taught you that you needed those things. So something to think about there. 11, don't get excited about a date until after the first month. Anybody can be great for a week. So don't get excited about this potential partner until after about a month. Everyone can put on their best act, for a week or two's time, but about a month you can start seeing real things. You can start seeing what's important in their life, and you can start getting to know who they are as a person a little bit better. So just take your time. Pump the brakes. Pump the brakes and make sure you're getting out of it what you should be. And if you're not, don't stay in it. Take your time, okay? Take your time. That's 11 and 12, basically. There's no deadline. 13 is control your emotions and excitement. She is a stranger. Treat it like that. Don't overshare. Don't tell people where your safe is. Don't give people the codes to your safe. Don't give them your social security number, right? Don't take them on dates where you're going to have intimate information out there. And I would suggest don't take them to your house. Once you take someone to your house, now they know where you live. I'll leave that there, okay? Once you take someone to your job, now they know where you work. Once you share that information, those places are no longer safe. Someone can show up uninvited at a time that you don't expect them. And that's not professional at work. And at home, you don't want somebody doing something crazy and breaking into your house and saying I'm not leaving, etc., etc. Watch 48 Hours or watch the Dateline if you want to know why you keep that stuff quiet. Control your emotions and excitement. She's a stranger. Get to know her first. 14 is do what you can when you can, no more, and say no. I was saying that about that date earlier. I could imagine, I'm just going to come off cocky, I don't mean it that way. I try to make dates fun, even if I have no interest in the person. And guys, I had a date like that before where I went out with a lady, and this was years ago, but I went out with a young lady, and within moments of being on the date, I was not attracted to her. She kind of catfished me. She sent me a picture where she was much smaller than what she was in her present state when I met her on the date. But she was still a sweet person. So what I decided was, I'm going to at least let her have the best time she can. I'm going to enjoy myself, and the restaurant's good, so I'm going to have some good food and just enjoy ourselves. So I made the date fun for both of us, and we had good conversation and everything else, but there was just nothing there. And when I left, and also, I'm old school. If I take a young lady on a date, I pay for it. But I also picked a restaurant. I'm not spending $1,000 on a meal. I'm not spending $200 on a meal. I may spend $150 because most restaurants will cost you that. If you have a couple of drinks and have a meal and you have an appetizer and some desserts, it can get to $150 real quick. But also, I typically eat the $30 steak, right? So majority of that is typically mine. I typically order one of the more expensive things on the menu because I don't eat out that often. And when I go, I want to go somewhere good and I want to have something good. This date is just being able to enjoy that with me, because if I'm going to do that, then I'll take that person. So do what you can when you can, no more, and say no. So if you're doing these things, that young lady I was telling you about, she wanted to go on a date every day. And I was like, what, do you need me for groceries? I was like, I don't have time. I work a job. I'm busy this week. We can probably go out on Saturday, or we can probably go out on Sunday or something like that. But take your time and do what you can, no more. Here's rule number 15, and to say this to adults, it's necessary. Don't have sex unless you want to. Don't have sex unless you want to. I have a friend, he got divorced. He felt dirty every time he had sex, but he kept going out with these girls that wanted sex. And it's not just a male problem. Females deal with the same thing. But I told him, I was like, well, stop. You don't have to have sex with these women because you're an adult. It's not, it's like when he was young and he got married, people kept him in line. His parents, his friends, he was religious and did all that stuff. And now when he's an adult and he's, recently divorced, he's sleeping with women he never would have slept with in the first place. But it goes back to dating apps. These aren't people he'd have talked to in the first place. And I was like, well, stop, because you're having this regret about doing it. You don't have to do anything. That's one additional benefit to meeting the person somewhere, is you're not stuck in the same car and you don't feel like you have to do things. And also it suggests that neither one of you are going to drink enough to get to the point where you feel like you have to do that, if you're not virtuously set in mind, where you're saying, all right, I'm going to get back into this where I'm dating to get married with intent. But frankly, if you just got divorced, I don't think you need to do that for a little while. I think you need to take some time to figure out who you are now in the modern world and then come to it. But like I said, all these are opinions. These are my opinions. This has worked for me. This is what I suggest. You can use your own. And this is very different from what we're saying, guys. I just wanted to have the verses out there for you. I wanted to share the wisdom that I got through my experiences and share you the wisdom of the story of the people I know and what they went through. And these aren't stories that I heard. These are people that I knew when I participated in the stories. So this isn't just hearsay. It's stuff that I knew. Okay, so don't have sex unless you want to. Use protection if you are, because STDs are rampant and everyone says they're clean. Everyone. So hear me now, believe me later. Everyone says they're clean. So if you're going to be having sex, in that clean kit, you need to have some stuff to protect yourself if that's what you're going to do. Because everyone says they're clean, you need to go ahead and make the assumption that no one is. Dating is different now. People are much more dishonest now than they were at least 20 years ago, because people think they can get away with it. It makes no sense. People think they can get away with more now than they've ever seen before, yet they post more online than at any point there was not that in history. They put their business out there more now than at any point in history, yet everyone thinks that moralistically they can get away with everything. It makes zero sense. 0 cents. Make sure you are getting what you want. It's not her way only. Make sure you're getting what you want. Stop being a serial monogamist. Date with intent, but date. Not everybody is going to be a match for you. Not everybody is going to work out. So when that happens, just say no. Say, I appreciate the time we spent together. It was fun, But make sure you're getting what you want. Not everyone is the one. Don't force it. Trust your gut. So if they say stuff that repulses you, if they do something you're like, what? Then you need to pay attention to that. Because what you don't want to do is forfeit years of your time in a situation where you're not ever going to end up with a person because of something that you knew wasn't going to match you anyway. Okay? So don't force it. Talking long hours on the phone is intimacy. Talking for long hours on the phone, I mean conversation, I don't mean texting. That's just stupid. It's a waste of time. But talking for long hours is intimacy. So you were married for a while, suggestively based on the context of the video, which you were sharing with that person because they were your spouse. Well, this person is not your spouse, so watch that. You don't want to get too intimate with people you date. One, it could be a turnoff. Two, you could be telling people personal stuff you don't need to tell them. And three, people aren't what they used to be. Women now take the text messages you sent them and show them to other women and talk about what you said and do, right? I mean, don't do all that. Don't put yourself in that spot. Use conversation as your primary way to talk to these people so you can get to know them, but you can also read their body language when they're getting to know you, and you have true communication getting on, just not some that supplicates itself to say, I spoke to you today. The next thing I would suggest is don't allow manipulation. Don't allow manipulation of any kind. Of any kind. You're old, you're just getting older. You can't waste time around people that are manipulative. The first time they're dishonest or manipulative, you've already got damage from a divorce where you're not going to trust people any damn way. So do not let them manipulate you. Anytime they're dishonest or they try to get manipulative, shut that door and be done with it right away. And that's another reason why for the first few months it might make sense for you to meet somewhere. Because as soon as you see that, you need to shut that door and move on, because that won't, it's just like we said earlier about that plate, that's not going to grow back. Once you lose that thought about somebody around their innocence and their purity, it's gone. So don't allow any type of manipulation at all. 21 is, how is the attitude? If the person has an awful attitude, you need to think about that. As you get older, what you want mostly in life is peace. If you waste a bunch of time with a person who's got a bad attitude, or even worse, you marry that person, now you're stuck with it and it's your fault. Okay? It's your fault. You do not want to be with a person with a bad attitude just because you have good sex or you think the sex is good, or at least you're having sex now, or however you may view it. Walk away. The next rule is know when to walk away and do it. Walk away. Do not let someone that's a miserable person make your life miserable. You're now in a different place in life, right? And also you're going to have fewer friends. You're going to have fewer circles. So you don't want to abandon and alienate those circles of friends and contacts that you have because you're spending time with a woman who makes you miserable and everyone sees that she makes you miserable when they're around. Or vice versa, if you're a female watching the video, if this is a dude that makes you feel awful, then don't be around them. And if they're saying you make them feel awful with regularity, then bounce. There's no reason for people to stay in a relationship where they're not happy. That's what you do when you're 18, 19, 25. You don't do that when you're 38, 40, 50. You don't do that. You get away from that quickly. Don't let good sex keep you in a bad relationship. There will always be more sex. Sex for human beings, and if you're young kids, shut this off. This is not for young kids. And I mean 17, 18, 19-year-olds. I'm not talking to young folks. I'm talking to older people that have maturity and have been in relationships for a while. You know as well as I do, there will always be more opportunities for sex. So you don't stay in a bad relationship because the sex is decent. Number 24 is don't keep a bad partner because of the kids. I mentioned that earlier. Kids are great. And, if you've been through a divorce, you may not think that you're going to have the opportunity to have kids. So if you meet some great kids, you want to just take care of them and act like they're yours, don't do that. You'll spend a lot of money doing that. You'll make attachment with the kids that will hurt your feelings later if you don't stay with that person. Number 25 is actually just a good saying, never complain or explain. Never complain or explain. Because if she is a permanent fixture, she'll understand how you feel. And if she's a pessimist and doesn't care anyway, she won't anyway. So that's not going to help it. Just have honest communication with the person. Give them the best opportunity you can to be successful in dating you. But don't go beyond that. You're not having to build a bridge here, and you shouldn't be trying to do that. 26 is gratitude and appreciation are mandatory. If the person does not enjoy your time, if they're not grateful for your time, if they're acting like you owe them something or they deserve something, get rid of that clown. Don't be used or taken for granted by anyone. And I'll say this. Went out with this girl, this lady, this woman. She was in her 30s. I wasn't I was probably 40. I don't know how old I was. This was right. This third person I dated after I got divorced. We had gone out a Tuesday, and then I was actually in a town where she was. And so we went out Wednesday. And then Thursday, she asked if I wanted to do something, and I was on the phone. I was like, "Well, we went out the last 2 days, and I work long days." I was like, "You up for going out?" And this is what she says to me. She goes, "Well, a girl's got to eat." And I'm like, "Yeah, you can feed your own fat." You know what I'm saying? I wasn't too enthusiastic about that. I thought the way it came off, it just showed, yeah, I'm being used for meals. So at that point, I was just done with it. I didn't bother calling her back after that, and which was good. I saw her on Facebook 3 years later, and wow. So immature of me. So gratitude and appreciation are mandatory. If someone is not grateful and not appreciating what you do for them, stop doing it. You're not married. Move on to someone that actually have the gratitude and the attitude. It will allow you to enjoy them because they enjoy and are grateful for what you do. Have the strength to leave when you should. If it doesn't work, call it. That's hard. That's hard for people to do because loyalty matters. And when you come out of divorce, and if it's bad, sometimes you'll stick into things just because it's a good person and they're loyal. That's something to think about. Just realize that the longer you're in something you shouldn't be in, the less likely you're going to find what you should be in. So just be careful there. Make sure it's making sense. Be kind. That's number 28. Be kind. No matter what the outcome, be kind. Leave things better than you found them. That's what I try to do in my adult dating life. Guys, I never thought I would be dating beyond the age of 25. I never thought I'd be dating at this point in my lifetime. And it's just real simple. All adults have been through some type of trauma or some type of difficulty or some type of betrayal. Betrayal is one of the ugliest words, right? That's why Jesus is such a great example. His people put him on a tree for saving them. That's what happened. You have to care about somebody for them to be able to betray you. You have to care about somebody and trust them for them to be able to lie and gut you. So all adults that are beyond the age of 28, 29, 30 years old have been betrayed in some way, shape, or form. They've all been lied to. They've all been broken. They've all been taken advantage of. They've all been used. And some of those trials have been extremely difficult, inappropriate, dangerous, heartbreaking, soul-wrenching, just part of the human existence. The human existence is suffering in many, many ways, and the relationships we choose can perfectly put us in those positions to be more damaged. So just be kind. No matter what the situation or the outcome, no matter whether you're going to work out or not, just be kind. Leave it better than what you found it. Try to leave them in a better place than you found them, especially if you spend any time. I'm thinking, more than 1 or 2 or 3 dates, especially if you're spending any time. And this is the last rule of any of it. When you're in a relationship, or you're trying to get into a relationship, or you're trying to build a relationship, either that person brings you up or they bring you down. Okay? You have limited days. Every day you wake up, you should be grateful. You have limited time. You have limited resources. Either that person brings you up or they bring you down. If they take your energy just to hold them up, that's not what you should be getting into if you're dating. You're not married. Okay? You're not married. If you're not married, then don't let someone bring you down. Try to find someone who has a personality like yours, and if you're a positive person, then have someone that's positive around you so you can be more positive. That should energize you and give you power, give you more opportunity to be positive and more things to be grateful for. So those are kind of my thoughts around dating after you're getting a divorce, after being in a marriage that didn't go your way or didn't go the way it should have. Kind of a long video, probably the second longest video I've ever done. And it's not subject matter that I talk a lot about. It's just on my mind today because of the conversation I started my day with. And as I started thinking about it, I actually had 4 or 5 examples other than just my personal situation that I watched the people go through it. And it was brutal for those folks. And it was bad for me, but it wasn't as brutal as it was for those guys. It's probably been bad for the people I've dated since because maybe I seem a little less enthusiastic about long-term type situations. And I'm aware of that. I mean, I know myself. I'm aware of that. I'm aware of my views. But there's a saying that you don't punish those in your present for what people did in your past, because if you do that, there's no future. I've heard that said many times, and I agree with that to a point. But just when it comes down to it, you're not married. And until you are, you have the selectivity of choosing and saying no. And that's what you should do, because hopefully if you do that, you learn more about yourself each time, and hopefully you'll get back into the mental thought process of looking at marriage as an option again. Hopefully this video is useful to you. Hopefully this information is wisdom for those that are seeking it out. It's different from what I normally do, but it's stuff that I've lived through too, so it is wisdom from that capacity. Also, I wanted to put the stuff in the Bible out there about divorce, because people sometimes try to use that as a club, especially in churches. They like to say, well, you're divorced, so No, if you were divorced for appropriate reasons, they can't say anything, because it's written right there in the Bible. You can still be a priest, you can still be a preacher, you can still be a deacon, you can still be a leader in the church if you had a divorce because of infidelity. You're not marked for that. She is. And then everybody touches her from there on is. So just understand that you as a male can still be a leader in those areas, even being divorced. So you shouldn't have to feel like that's that. And this is what I'll say. Nobody's a victim. Ultimately, everybody has to own their part of it. So even in my divorce, I own my part of it. I was away too much, I guess, and that allowed her to fall into moral decay. Who knows? I did not wrong that other person. She did. And to see what that guy was going through and how he felt, it didn't make me feel better about the situation, but I definitely didn't feel like I was the biggest part of the problem, if you know what that means. So yeah, I could probably go on with this subject for a while. I just don't want to seem jaded. I'm not broken. I'm not jaded. I was fine before. I was fine after it. In one of the conversations she and I had one time, she asked me about that, and I was like, look, I was me a lot longer than I was me with you. So I'm going to be fine. And I wanted to make sure she was going to be fine. And guys, I set her up too, so it's not like this thing where I bounced. The judge let me out of there quickly because I had proof that I'd already done all these things for her since then. So that divorce was quick and easy compared to what a lot of people go through, because we didn't have kids and we didn't have a house and property that we owned together. So there's that. Enjoy the video. If you like subject matter similar to this, but not exactly like this, because I'm not going to do this again and I haven't done it before, please like and subscribe. And if you're a gentleman that's gone through all this, we've suffered some of the same things, subscribe to the channel. You'll like some of the other stuff I have, and some of my thought processes probably came from some of that stuff too. So subscribe to the channel. I'm Ben. Be good.